we could be looking at a long-term, protracted civil conflict in Myanmar itself that could result in millions of refugees, many more deaths, and no end in sight for many years. There are a number of outcomes that we could see over the next few weeks. The best case scenario would be for Aung San Suu Kyi to be released and for some kind of negotiations between the military and the protest movement and the restoration of democracy. Given the army's past record of brutality against its own population, that seems unlikely. Another terrible scenario would be an even more bloody crackdown on protesters, which we have seen already. And then there is also the possibility of a long-term armed insurgency against the military. So yes, we could be seeing a potentially more explosive situation in Myanmar. We could see long-term conflict. We're not at the worst case scenario yet, but it certainly can't be ruled out. With both sides, the military and the protesters, unwilling to back down in any way, then the window for a more peaceful solution is closing rapidly. And what you've got on one side, you have protesters who are legitimately asking for democracy, for elections to be respected. And on the other side, you have a very brutal military who have no qualms about turning their guns on their own population. And there's currently no mediator between them. The CRPH, which is the informal parliament made up of politicians who were not allowed to sit because of the coup, they have invoked the right for protesters to be able to defend themselves. And there have also been increasing calls on the internet for an alternative army, a federal army that could challenge the existing army. And if that happens, then the likelihood of a protracted internal conflict really increases. You have these ethnic armies who are believed to have some 100,000 armed members already versus the Myanmar military, which has around 400,000. And now that you have so many young people who've lived with democracy for a decade, that's been taken away from them. And they are being brutalized by the army, and many of them have been beaten up or they've seen their friends killed. That's also likely to increase the chances of them wanting to join any armed struggle against the military if it comes to that. It's still early days, and it's still too early to see if it's going to go in that direction, but it's definitely a possibility. The protest movement is not just about street rallies, it's also about the civil disobedience movement, where you have business leaders, you have medical staff, lawyers, teachers who are refusing to work because they don't want to work for the junta. And that is also making a big impact. It's affecting the economy, and long term it could really have more influence on the military's actions. And you also have the other factor of defections from the police and from soldiers, and these aren't widespread yet, but they could really be a game changer in how this conflict turns out if that also if they increase in number. There have been some sanctions, but nobody believes that these sanctions are going to make much impact at all. If the military think that they can get away with their coup and with this violent crackdown without much recrimination from China or from Asia, then as well as the rest of the world, then they'll do so. They don't really care about strong statements from the United Nations.